Hello, my name is Matthew Galuzzo, and I am a federal criminal defense attorney here in New York City. Now, I've been a federal defense attorney for about 15 years, and prior to that, I was a prosecutor in Manhattan for about 7 years. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about federal homicide charges. I've represented numerous people accused of this crime, and I want to explain a little bit about those charges and how they might differ from the more routine state court homicide charges. Now, a federal homicide charge differs from a state homicide charge in that there is an underlying federal aspect to it, something that gives a federal court jurisdiction over that charge. Now, most homicides are prosecuted in state court. If, for example, I were to kill someone on the sidewalk outside because I was mad at them or upset about something, I would almost certainly be charged in state court with a homicide. It'd be a very serious case, of course, but it would be a state court case. And it would be a state court case because there's nothing federal about it. I didn't travel across state lines. It didn't happen on state property. It wasn't pursuant to any sort of federal conspiracy or RICO or anything of that nature. And that's what gets these cases into federal court. For example, if you were to commit a homicide on federal property, like, I don't know, perhaps a national park or a federal monument of some kind, a federal courthouse, or inside a federal correctional facility, that happens sometimes, that can get you into federal court with a federal homicide charge. There's a thing called maritime jurisdiction. So if you were to kill someone perhaps on a cruise ship or a boat on its way to or from the United States, or if you were to kill someone on an airplane flight to or from the United States or traveling over the United States, that might give the federal court jurisdiction to prosecute you as well. But more commonly what you see is homicides being prosecuted in federal court pursuant to a federal conspiracy of some kind. You know, the government typically will charge a person as belonging to some sort of criminal organization, some sort of racketeering organization under RICO, or perhaps some drug trafficking organization. And if they can make out the case that the homicide was pursuant or done in furtherance of this multi-state or international organization, and they can bring that charge into federal court under that theory. You might also see sometimes people being brought into federal court under a slightly different theory. The federal government has the right to regulate firearms, handguns and things of that nature especially. And so when people use firearms to kill people, sometimes they can bring somebody in on a federal homicide charge by saying that they have used a firearm illegally in order to kill someone. It's not exactly homicide, but it is. It's just charged a little bit differently and gets that person before the federal judge. Now, homicide charges in federal court are particularly dangerous for defendants in that first-degree homicides in federal court potentially carry the death penalty. We don't see the death penalty in state court, in New York State court anymore. It's been deemed unconstitutional by our courts. But in federal court, sometimes the Department of Justice does pursue the death penalty for the most serious federal homicide cases. So that's obviously a very serious consideration for anybody charged that way. But even when they're not being charged, or even when the government is not pursuing a death penalty against a person, they're still very frequently facing life sentences in federal prison. So these cases are extremely serious. And if you or a loved one have been charged with a crime like this, I strongly suggest that you give me a call. We can talk about my possible representation of you. I've helped a lot of people facing these sorts of charges avoid these types of penalties. And it really comes down to really solid advocacy and having a good, solid strategy in place for your defense. Thank you.